Good evening, greatest audience on the planet, and welcome back to On Eagle's Wings. Very pleased tonight to have a very special guest, a friend that we've done a couple shows with, Robert Sperry. He is of MUFON, an organization that I've been very interested in, kind of followed over the years, and as of recent, um, Bob and a lot of his gang has been working with us at UAP Crossfire. I think you've probably seen some of the shows. And I asked him to come on to kind of talk a little bit about his background. I think it's very interesting, man. Very interesting background. And I also wanted to get his perspective on where MUFON is today based on its history and where it's headed in the near future. They have a very important conference and conclave of sorts this summer coming. And I really would like everyone that has a chance to participate that in every level possible. So without any further ado, let's bring in Bob of MUFON. Now, Bob, I have to tell you one thing. When I was typing some stuff up, every time I would put MUFON Bob or Bob of MUFON, autocorrect would make it Muffin. So if I do Bob of Muffin or Muffin Bob, I apologize in advance. Welcome, sir, to On Eagle's Wings, the greatest audience on the planet. We've been speaking with each other quite a bit over the last couple of weeks. Thank you very much for taking the time and jumping on the show tonight.
Thank you very much for having me, Commander.
I am most curious about how people arrive where they do. You and I are probably pretty close in age, and I'm curious what drove you to this interest and really a large part of your life being involved in the what I consider a fairly proper or a organized way of investigating the UFO phenomenon.
Well, it's been lifelong. When I was 6 years old in 1965, we had the Great Northeastern Blackout, November 9th, I believe it was. And the next day, and I lived right across the Hudson River from Manhattan, so all we could see was the silhouette of the skyline. It was fascinating. And the next day, my uncle came over telling us they think that a UFO took out the Clay Power Station at Niagara Falls. And it turned out there were 7 reports of UFOs that night near the Clay Power Station. And so there definitely was a UFO connection, and there has been with many power stations over the years. I'm hooked at that point. I'm 6. My uncle starts buying me Gold Key UFO magazines. I'm in 5th grade in 71. He buys me Chariots of the Gods when it comes out, Saga magazine in the 70s. And in the 80s, I had a rather mundane but interesting orb experience where I saw an orb dancing over a lake, and I had never considered anything about UFOs to that point. That what I was watching was actually like a UFO. It was dancing, and then it shot off at incredible speeds. A couple of years later, I saw a silver sphere pacing my train. I was a locomotive engineer at the time, and it was just maybe 6 feet in diameter, 1,000 feet out, 1,000 feet up, just going 60 miles an hour with the train. So basically, when I was going to report some of these things, I found MUFON. And at the time, the website was pretty simple. I considered joining. And then I met a fellow who wrote a book on orbs. His name was Terry Ray. He was a MUFON field investigator in PA. And he was speaking on orbs. And I went to see him. He convinced me to join MUFON. I became a field investigator. And because of my management background, I'm now the Director of International Development for MUFON.
So you brought up orbs. I'm going to bring 2 points, and I think you and I have actually talked about this a little bit before. I have heard and I have read many of the ancient alternative history people point to how UFO people go after their craft, how they, not the craft as in spacecraft, but the types of research and the types of doggedness that they have to find evidence, put it together, collate it all together to try to drive to a conclusion. So 2 things on the orb part of it. Where do you see the paranormal and UFO overlap? Or do you not see no overlap, no intersection between those two? Because it can be almost like stepping into the wrong religion. You can go in and you can talk, and no, we don't talk about that. We're into ghosts, and vice versa. No, we don't want to talk about that. And there's very interesting crossovers. Orbs happens to be one that always seems to have a very interesting crossplay. So that's the first part. The second part is, how do you classify orbs? Long before the UAP term kind of came out, which I kind of put those in that because they don't seem to have the traditional craft type shape or behaviors. But they're obviously a phenomenon that's been around since recorded history.
Mm. Well, I've been totally into researching orbs for like 15 years now, and it's not one phenomenon; it's multiple phenomena. All right, it can be something as simple as ball lightning, which is just a natural weather phenomenon. Sometimes when a bolt of lightning strikes the dirt, which is made out of silica, it may turn into a short-lived ball of ionized gas, which will boom explode after a minute. Real orbs don't do that. Real orbs can last for hours. They can do all sorts of dancing, crazy things in the sky. But the question you asked is, where does the UFO meet the paranormal aspect of it? I can tell you that there are paranormal orbs. There are hundreds and hundreds of reports of people claiming that they saw an orb turn into an entity, or they saw an entity turn into an orb. And we really can't explain that in a nuts and bolts way. But then there's also, besides paranormal orbs and natural weather phenomenon, there's a third type of possible orb, and that's the type of orb that's a real craft, maybe spherical, enveloped in a plasma field. Why would a technological object be wrapped in a plasma field, making it look like a glowing ball of gas? Is because plasma will absorb radar signals and make a spherical object wrapped in a blanket like that invisible to radar for obviously warlike purposes mostly. So
I've also
I think it's more than one. It's more than one phenomenon. Is what I'm getting at.
I really was impressed by that part of that definition, because when you talk about some of the more edgy physics that's going on right now for propulsion, producing the plasma field around a traditional airfoil type aircraft that's using propulsion of some kind,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe another, a break from the escape gases type propulsion and moving into something that tends to be anti-gravity or using that kind of thing in there. Talks about this is how you would keep skin friction down for reaction with the atmosphere. As you said, it would give almost a cloaking kind of stealthiness to it, and might be responsible for. Now we do this in certain underwater applications already. There are building these kinds of bubbles, for lack of a better term, of a technical term, around a projectile under the water to allow it to be able to maneuver and go very, very fast. Not easy to do, but that's part of where it goes, because the medium is building up a lot of back pressure on the movement it's going through. So it does fit in a lot of areas, and I think that's a pretty astute observation. What I would like to ask: do you think that orbs are protection or a field around other types of craft besides a spherical craft?
Oh, I think so. I mean, in the MUFON, our database has about 146,000 cases now, and it's just permeated with cases of what look like auras around certain types of craft, not necessarily a spherical type craft. A lot of times that aura is like a bluish green, and I can show you examples.
Sure.
60 years down the line. Even John Keel back in the 60s believed that the changing colors of the orbs or these other types of craft with what looks like a cloud or an aura around them, it may have something to do with the actual propulsion system, maybe creating almost like an envelope for them to travel in, which is what you were getting at. So yes, I don't think it's limited to orbs.
Very interesting. Um, you talked about the great blackout of our youth. We are, as I said, very close in age. I was in the Massachusetts area, and we were convinced. And as the family gathered in the apartment of my grandmother, we lived in a triple decker outside of Boston. We did not get the UFO word until much later, since we weren't close to you in New York and Niagara. We were convinced that this was very likely the Russians, then Soviets coming over the top, and this was the start of it. And There was some brief discussion about, who was going in the basement and, what we were going to do, and everything settled out. And I think it's appropriate to bring up that that was an age where radio remained king, because radio still worked. Many of the radio stations were able to put out on emergency generators a signal. And if you had a battery operated radio, you got some information. Now, my dad was a very early UFO enthusiast, and very, very interested in the subject. The same kinds of books and magazines that you had made their way into my house. So I think it's an interesting parallel how that around that time it struck the same kind of chord with me. And I found it very interesting with my parents. Roman Catholics, they didn't have any conflict with having the possibility that other beings from not this world were part of the greater galactic family, created under God. And I've always been very thankful that there wasn't that kind of conflict for them, because it seemed to make sense to them.
My pastor doesn't believe in aliens either. He believes it's all demonic, like my wife. And I mean, part of it could be. I mean, there's so many different places where these entities could be coming from, but it would never affect my religion if we found out tomorrow there's aliens.
Well, I mean, if it's demonic or not, or part of it is demonic, like you said, it kind of fits. I mean, I just don't think you can read a Judeo-Christian Bible and some of the other texts of like the Hindus and not come with the conclusion that some people have been recording this information for quite a while.
Absolutely.
And experiences are there for quite a while. I mean, I think that you have to have a rather narrow interpretation of the reading, and I still don't get the how you would miss that. But that's, each person makes their choice. We'll probably touch upon that in a bit. So I noticed when I was doing a little research on you, ham radio, which I'm a big fan of and have been in and out of for many years myself. What do you like to do with that? Did it have any kind of part of what you do with MUFON?
No, I actually got into it, and I'm really not into it anymore. My license is still active. But when I worked on it, part of it's what we were talking about before. When I worked for the railroad, I worked for the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. And when the planes hit the World Trade Center, that's where the huge AM antennas were, and nobody could talk to anybody because they took out the building that had the radio station antennas. And it was about that time that I was dabbling in ham radio, and we did a little bit of it at the railroad as far as communications go. But by and large now, ham radio, it's a different animal, because now you have internet ham radio, and it doesn't require you. When I first took the test in high school, and I failed it.
I know what you're going to do. It's the Morse code, right?
Morse code. I failed the Morse code. All right. Now you don't have to do that stuff anymore. Nope. But just the challenge of reading those books and taking that test was what excited me most, because I had a FRA locomotive engineer's license. I have a ham radio license from the FCC, and now I'm going to go for my drone license from the FAA. So I want to. So
are you going to do Part 107, or are you going to do the advanced commercial?
Just 107, and when my son gets old enough, I think he wants to start some sort of drone business. So I want to have the edge to help him.
Yeah. Well, there's talk about some great simulators online for that work as well. Mm-hmm. And of course, a phenomena that is in the news nearly constantly is the drone part. We'll touch upon that in a bit, because I'd like to get your take on that. So let's talk the formation of MUFON. 69, as the colloquial kind of understanding is, Blue Book closes down. It's unsatisfactory. Who gets together and puts MUFON together?
Okay, so MUFON actually existed at that point. Basically, in the 50s, NICAP, the National Investigative Committee on Aerial Phenomena, started by Major Kehoe, and also APRO, the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization. APRO was started by Jim and Carol Lorenzen. And MUFON broke away from APRO. and we called ourselves the Midwestern UFO Network in 1967. 2 years later, when the Condon report came out and said that UFOs are not a threat to national security, the Air Force wiped their hands, or at least we think they wiped their hands, of the situation and bailed on investigating UFOs and closed Blue Book. And MUFON's motto became doing the Air Force's business since 1969. And we're an open grassroots 501c3 nonprofit. We're not beholden to any government. We're not beholden to any private corporations. We do our own thing. We work with Congress. We'll give Congress quarterly reports because they're the people's part of the government, but we don't interact with the military or private corporations involved.
Interesting. What's your opinion of what we did with Blue Book?
I've always felt that Blue Book was a cover for something deeper. And did Blue Book really end? Did Grudge really end any of those programs? Back in 1988, I think you know who he is. Milton William Cooper wrote Behold a Pale Horse. He got his hands on a document called the Aquarius document, and that basically lays out all of the different secret projects that the Air Force was doing at the time, not only the Air Force, but the military in general. And some of them might actually be still in effect. The Aquarius document talks about Little Grays. It talks about Project Red Light, where they were trying to pilot a crash retrieval. There's a lot of interesting stuff in those documents. And I lost my train of thought why I was going there with that.
Well, we were talking about how Blue Book turned out.
Okay. I don't think Blue Book really ended. All right. As a matter of fact, in 1974 in Carbondale, Pennsylvania, there was a crash retrieval, and there's a big UFO festival there. And I actually spoke to one of the people who was a teenager at the time, and he said that when they took this object away, the side of the truck, the door said United States Air Force UFO Recovery Team. So that's not something somebody would just make up and tell me 40 years later at a UFO festival. That seems to be like a real detail. So I don't think Blue Book ever ended. They just changed the names, changed the gatekeepers, and it seems like it may be climaxing now in 2026.
Well, obviously, we'll return to that point because I think there is obviously a lot of energy behind that.
Mm-hmm.
So Blue Book, not a satisfactory closeout, but we try to put some kind of Band-Aid or cover onto what we did. Tell me your read on this statement. I think the Air Force learned very early on, regardless of what they were doing, that this was a very effective way to control the message, to cause a deception on activities and message, and make it a very active way to cover very terrestrial projects. Do you agree or disagree with something like that?
I agree. Just like I said before, orbs could be multiple phenomena. I actually believe that there's a lot of different things going on. And I think that the Air Force, the military in general, sometimes with the help of media, has been directing us the way they wanted to go for the past 50 years or so, maybe longer. But where the thing that changed was, they don't ridicule people anymore. They take it more seriously, and I think that's because there's so many different ways that people get information today off the internet that it's becoming more and more difficult for the government to use subterfuge to hide top secret projects. So,
well, culturally, what do you think the tempo? I think MUFON's, if any organization has read that, what does MUFON see culturally has changed? I mean, there are times when I'm convinced, and I don't mean this as disrespectful it comes down, but we are dumber on most subjects than we've ever been at any point in my lifetime with this. We seem to be completely caught up in other subjects where this one doesn't seem to gather the attention it did in the 70s and 80s to me. That's just my general impression. Do you agree with that? Or does MUFON have kind of a feel for where culturally we're going with this?
Yeah, I think that UFOs becoming much more culturally accepted. But people are coming forward to MUFON with stories that are 50 years old now. And in their story narrative, they always say the same thing. I was afraid to tell anybody about this because I thought people would think I'm crazy. Now it's the complete opposite. It's the the media is in on it. We have all of these people, famous representatives now, these gatekeepers. We have all of these corporations like Lockheed Martin talking about reverse engineering material. So the UFO street, let's say, I think has always been aware that we're progressing towards some sort of disclosure, whether it's real or not. But the general public is probably more concerned with what's going on in Ukraine and Iran right now. So we sort of slip under the radar. Although Trump now is claiming that they're going to mint a coin in association with disclosing the UFO files that he's going to be. So sometimes I says, is it just all about money? All right. Is it some sort of grift, or are they really going to tell us something? Because
Yeah.
I know there's stuff going on.
Right. You have to admit, when you hear something like that, it has to cause you pause. Okay. But to me, it's a rather exciting time because this particular administration just doesn't seem to really play by
Mm-hmm.
normative standards of how things are released. So that good or bad, in favor or not, I think there's very interesting statements that come out. I think some are absolutely lunatic from some folks that are in the government as well as folks that used to be in the government. And you lead me to my next point. You talk about people that come to you with an experience 50, 60 years ago. I think it's pretty easy to create a false narrative from 50, 60 years ago. And MUFON does a really, I think, thorough job of documenting and investigating, but documenting what people are saying so that that information is recorded, and it's recorded in a way sort of like what Chris and Decker do when they were in law enforcement, that they would get information down in a file, and then you have some place to work with it. Now, you may determine that the things that are in the file can't be verified or just are out now falsehoods, but
Right.
it doesn't mean that everything that's said is not worthy of an examination. So take the audience through a little bit how MUFON does that. So when you have someone comes to you and says, well, I didn't want people to think I was crazy 50 years ago.
Okay, so with historical reports, there's really not much you can do with them. But let me preface that by saying there's three ways that you can actually investigate a UFO report. MUFON does not investigate UFOs. We investigate UFO reports because in 100% of the incidents, it's over. Maybe a week has gone by, maybe 50 years has gone by. So unless there's some sort of trace material at the site or dirt that you could collect, a piece of debris, an implant.
Physical interaction with the Earth. Sure.
The second thing would be photographs and videos, and the third right now. But we will have we will have real-time alerts coming soon because that's the way the UFO field is going right now. But the third way, and this is one of my favorite things to do, is you look for patterns in narratives, and that's one of the great search features of our case management system, that you can do all sorts of searches for specific types of keywords or dates or craft shape, craft color, and you will definitely find that all over the world, over decades, people are reporting the same thing over and over and over again. And so you have to ask yourself, is it culturally influenced? Are a lot of these people insane? Or is there some sort of psychic Jungian unconscious, collective unconsciousness going on? People are dreaming the same things. They're experiencing these bedroom interactions the same way. They're being abducted and slapped on a metal table in a round room with diffused blue light. So when you start seeing this hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times, you can start compiling statistical, information databases that show you patterns that have to suggest that this is a real manifestation that's going on with these people. So it's trace evidence, it's witness narrative, and it's photos and videos. And soon, MUFON and others will be setting up networks around the world to actually try to correlate scientific data coming in something triggers a real-time alert. Will it trigger another alert nearby? Will we be able to look at corresponding cases in our database and other databases? It's going to bring us up a notch as far as investigating goes.
You triggered two things that I want to talk. First one that just kind of jumped right in the forefront. It seems to me that we have less photographic evidence now than we did when we did not all walk around with a device in our hand or in our hip pocket that you can make a movie and have it online in about 40 minutes, i.e., our cell phones and capabilities to do that. Do you agree with that premise, or am I just not seeing all the material that's out there?
There's so many ways you can look at that question. Have the visitors, whoever they are, changed their MO because everybody's got cell phones now? I think we talked about this before, and you had another good reason why, and I can't think what it was now. But sure, it's like it could be they're changing their ways. What I have found, and I look at every single MUFON case every year, about 5,000 of them, 95% of the videos we get are explainable. It's an internal lens flare, it's a Chinese lantern. So there's very, very few really good videos and photos out there. Sometimes it's the limitation of the camera, and now they have these software packages inside cameras that'll actually erase the UFO, thinking it's a blemish in the film, and when you look at your digitized photograph, there's nothing in it, although you definitely took a picture of something. So the photos question's a complicated one. There's multiple reasons why we don't get good photos. Yeah.
You would premise, though, you would agree that we seem to have less when we have more collection devices.
Yes, I'd say that.
Or I should say more collection devices available.
Yeah, we had to get a new server to increase our space to handle all of the videos and photographs we're getting, and the pixels are getting better, so the files are getting larger and they take up more and more space. But when you have larger files with more pixels, a lot of times it's a clearer indication of what the witness was actually seeing. I've got a number of really good triangle photographs. So
that's my great white whale. No ironic pun in there, but the triangle-shaped aircraft that will always, to me, that is a multifaceted situation all around. So let me throw this to you. You made a remark that really triggered something in the back of my brain, and of course, I'm Commander Cobra, so I have a reptilian kind of sense for these things. Do we have, or are we suffering from an active algorithm in our processing in our cell phones that intentionally kind of pushes those kinds of things out?
Well, yeah, I'll be honest with you. I don't trust anybody or anything anymore, especially in this.
Well, hopefully by the end of this, we'll have a bond. We'll have a small trust bond. But yeah, I think that's fair.
I laughed so hard I knocked off the microphone jack.
That was all part of it, and that could be any one of those magic agencies that just caused that to happen.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. There's just so much information coming at us now. So many incidents. Hellfire and missile shoot downs near Yemen, disappearing scientists, jellyfish over Iraqi bases, whistleblowers. Coins being minted, Trump's alleged speech. I just can't keep up with what's going on now, what to believe and what not to believe. Even Spielberg says, I think I found the answers I was looking for about aliens with my new movie Disclosure. That even sounds like a marketing pitch. The guy wasn't even interested when he made Close Encounters, talking to all possibilities with Jacques Vallée, and now all of a sudden he feels that this movie is going to answer all the questions. I think a lot of what's going on is a bit of grift, to be perfectly honest. But I am hopeful with the Anna Luna photographs, and I'll tell you why. There's 46 photographs or videos that Anna Luna, the representative, is trying to get from Pete Hegseth at the Pentagon. All right. One of the things you will notice over the past several years, especially since the Tic Tac video came out, when they show us this stuff at congressional hearings, on the TV, whatever, they never show us any metadata, no EXIF data. So there's no way that you can verify Jeremy Corbell's Iraqi jellyfish, for example, all right, or the Mosul sphere. So what MUFON wants to do is we want to send a letter to Anna Luna and say, MUFON has a photo analysis team. All of these videos you've been putting out for years, nobody ever sees the exit data, the metadata. We're willing to do it. We have our own photo analysis team. And after sending the letter to Anna Luna, we want all of our members to write to Anna Luna and make the same suggestion. That's the only way you're going to get people to give you anything of substance.
I think that kind of very direct engagement is correct.
Mhm.
I obviously I have formed very strong opinions of all those cases that you brought up, and I don't, and with the exception of the Molzoo case, I don't see extraterrestrial at all. Just based on my time in that part of the world and what I think we were looking at, and everyone knows that knows me that I'm convinced that Tic Tac is advanced tech. Now, where it came from, where it was reversed engineered, that to me is man-made and man-controlled technology. But that's not the gist of where we're going. This leads me into your role in international development. Now, I think you've kind of alluded to it. Trying to get things straight with the United States, and you've got a pretty good system there. And now you're trying to make sure that we collate that with other MUFON organizations across the globe. Correct?
Yeah, international development covers a lot of things. It's basically all of the projects that we've wanted to implement over the years. This summer we have Andrus coming out. Walt Andrus was our founder, and Andrus is actually an acronym for the Automated Network Database for Research into UFO Sightings.
Talk about something that should be made into a coin.
Yeah, right.
Right there.
And we actually have we have the little planetoids can spin. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So it's really cool. But this is going to be our new database, and I'm heavily involved with that project. It requires training all of our field investigators onto a new reporting system. We're going to keep the old reporting system with 146,000 cases, and it will be still a membership benefit, but it's going to have an associated app. It's going to have a map. We're going to have multiple UFO databases that have been donated to us. So that's one project I'm involved in. I'm also doing a lot of the social media for MUFON. We're trying to build up our Facebook, Instagram, YouTube channels. Our YouTube channel is almost at 100,000. X is at 160. X is at 160,000. Facebook's 151,000. Instagram 60,000, and we're building TikTok and Rumble, and we're going to go to Spotify. So we have a lot of things going on with that. Also, when you change things the way we're doing, we have to change the courses in our MUFON University for our field investigators for a new system. We have to change our field investigator manuals, our state director handbooks. So I pretty much have my fingers in everything that's going on now, and I'm still investigating cases on the side. So
now, I want to go through the university and that in a second, but I'm going to throw what I consider probably the most challenging question up front first before we go in.
Okay.
How does MUFON kind of keep the ranks straight, or for lack of a better term, police its investigator force? I mean, how do you know that someone hasn't come into the organization that's inside there to wreck it, to cause nothing but trouble? Or you have people that are just crappy investigators. It happens, they just don't do a good job, or just don't have the right. I mean, to me, it seems like it would be a very, very critical part of MUFON to make sure that those standards are met and kept. How's that done?
Yeah, for the past 20 years with the current case management system, you manually had to go in and look up your people to see if they were following through. We have a 60-day cutoff where we want cases closed. So even if you don't have everything you need, close it temporarily, you can always reopen
Right.
it. Okay.
So you have a methodology and a standard operating procedure on that.
And in the current system, because it's manual, we have to constantly email some of the investigators, hey, you're coming up on 60 days. We haven't seen anything input as far as your investigation goes. So we get that. Any volunteer organization, you're going to have people who are absolutely dedicated beyond belief, absolutely talented and gung ho. And then you're going to get people who get the diploma and say, oh, this isn't what I really thought it was going to be. And they just sort of slack off immediately. Our new system, the Andrew system, will be totally automated. So if Joe Smith has forgotten about his case at 55 days, he gets an email. Joe, you got to finish up the case or at least close it temporarily. So the new system is such an improvement over the 20-year-old system that we have now because everything will be automated. And we can print out reports of how many cases are still open in Australia. It's like it will be able to do anything as far as search capabilities and reports go.
All right. So does MUFON have an AI capability in the future that it's thinking about?
Yeah, part of it actually will run on AI. It's going to be able to collate uh, data from other resources such as Flight Radar 24 and weather and satellite passovers. We're going to be able to populate those things automatically into the new database when someone submits a report. Yeah, we're using AI to do that at this point. What I would like to use AI for in the near future is to really eke out those patterns that I love to find
Right.
because it takes me, 6 months of looking through our database just for the perfect cases with patterns. AI could probably do that work in 60 seconds.
True. Very strong possibility of data management and data structure analysis
Mhm.
there.
Mhm.
What I always worry with AI is it is highly dependent on how it's uh, programmed in, how the algorithm is created, and then how it's put into the line code. And unfortunately, most of us don't do the line code. We have others that do it for us. So um, I found as of late, we spend a lot of time using competing AIs to see if they both can check each other out that we come
Mhm.
up with it.
Mhm.
It's an amazing tool. I mean, in my day job, we use it all the time to get a rather uh, quick analysis on huge amounts of regulatory documents, manuals, and then event case histories. And you're
Mhm.
right; it spits it out very, very quickly. But it still requires you to go back. It just you're not spending 6 months getting that information. You're maybe spending 30 days going through what was
Right.
there and confirming what you saw, which is a tremendous improvement in
Mhm.
time.
Mhm.
All right, we're coming up against a quick break. My guest tonight is MUFON Bob Sperry from MUFON. He is the Director of International Operations. Very, very fortunate to have him tonight. We've been doing a lot together over the last few weeks with UAV Crossfire and their work. And I want to get to some big events that are coming up for MUFON when we come back side of the break. Be right back. Welcome back to On Eagle's Wings. My guest, Bob Spearing from MUFON. Sometimes, depending on how the AI works, Muffin Bob. I prefer MUFON Bob. You have a big. Before we talk about the conference and slash convention, I have one thing I wanted to ask you. During COVID, what happened with MUFON? Um, was it one of those organizations that, with more people with time, were drawn to MUFON? Did you see more activity during that? Um,
Actually, no. It membership dipped, and I think that's because people were worried economically what was going to happen with COVID. All right. What did go up in a positive way was the number of UFO reports that we received. And that's
Interesting.
because a lot of people were outside social distancing with nothing to do. So they just happened to be looking up at the sky a lot more than they would if there was no COVID going on. So, yeah, it was a boom for UFO reports, but that just goes to show you how unreliable UFO statistics could be
Sure.
because that was an aberration, a spike, because
Right.
everyone was outside. So, how many times were people not outside that were missing all of those? And now, the other problem with UFO reporting is that we're not the only major source for people to report UFOs to now. We're competing with private corporations, Arrow, the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. They all want reports for whatever reasons they want reports. So this is going to ruin monthly statistics for UFOs forever if nobody consolidates that data.
I think you touched upon my explanation or possible explanation why we had less activity since we had handheld cell phone devices, because you just stumbled upon it. Everybody's got their face down
Down, yeah.
on the phone. I mean, people just don't look at the sky as much as they used to. And if they do, they're looking at the sky with their phone, through their phone, or they're looking down and they're looking at an app that's showing them what's going on around them. So I think, not that I'm any kind of, Svengali to come up with a really great explanation there, but I find it absolutely amazing that, very funny videos, as long as no one's badly hurt, people walking in malls, walking into street lights, all kinds of bumps and bruises that go on with it because they're just so glued to their phone, and they miss a lot of the activity that's around them on that. And I think that there's a very valid assumption there that if you have advanced races, advanced technology, I'll even go as far as say demonic, they're not going to be easily detected if they don't want to be detected, if they have that kind of technology. Look at the money that we spend to cloak in stealth and other technologies not to be detected. So that's a very common feature in that. With that said, big events that's coming up for MUFON in the next couple of months. Obviously, your major part is your convention and your conference. Let's talk a little bit about that, please.
Okay, so every year, MUFON has a World Symposium, a World Convention, and this year it's going to be in the Northern Kentucky Convention Center in Covington, Kentucky. And if you're familiar with that area, it is a short walk across the Ohio River into downtown Cincinnati. So it's very centrally located. It's going to be the last week before school this year. And it runs from August 27th. On August 27th, we have field investigator training. It's extra paid course that people who are interested in becoming field investigators will want to learn forensic techniques. All day long from 8 to 4, we have different instructors that will be teaching people how to do photo analysis, that type of thing. Friday is when the symposium starts in earnest with our banquet Friday night. Our keynote speaker for our banquet will be Peter Robbins. Peter is a long-time UFO researcher, author, podcaster, TV personality, and he's going to be talking on his 50 years in ufology. So he will be our banquet speaker on Saturday. We have a whole host of speakers, but the two keynotes is Peter Robbins, and on Saturday it's going to be Alex Dietrich. And I'm really looking forward to hearing what Ms. Dietrich has to say. She was one of 4 crew members involved in the 2004 Nimitz Tic Tac incident. She will be speaking on Saturday at our symposium. Along the way, we have experiencer workshops, we have special sessions, we have the general reception, the benefactors reception, and we also have 2 cases of interest presentations, your nuts and bolts cases, and then your experiencer cases that usually concern abductions. They're my 2 favorite presentations, the cases of interest presentations. So it's running August 27th through the 30th, and on Saturday night, we're doing something new this year. We're going to have a river cruise up the Ohio River for 2 hours with a buffet included. So I've never done that, but I've heard that MUFON's cruises are some of the best in the world. So I'm booking
well, wouldn't you say they're out of the world, Bob? I mean, if you're really
I'd say they're out of the world, except if you're on the Ohio River. So. And that's what's going on. So I'm excited.
So, who goes to this symposium? Obviously, members of MUFON. But I would encourage people that have even the most fleeting of interest. This is well worth their time to go take a look and just, I mean, the tiniest possible interest in this.
We get a vast swath of different types of people. We get the old timers who've been coming to conventions for 30, 40 years. We get young people, a lot of Gen Z come, especially when we have a speaker like Alex Dietrich. They want to hear what's going on with the Nimitz. We also get a lot of people who are experiencers. We have vendors come in that are selling different types of product that have an interest in the UFO field. So I'd say it's a broad range of people come to our symposiums. There's the hardcore people, the members, but being open to the general public, we get all sorts, young and old.
Do you think the atmosphere that's been set up around disclosure makes this a more pivotal year for this symposium?
Yeah, it's like I keep asking myself this question. If the symposium's in August, between today and August, how much is the world going to change as
Right.
far as disclosure? Because you're going to have you're going to have Contact in the Desert, then you're going to have the Ron James movie Accidental Truth Next, which is a joint MUFON production that's coming out in May. What else you got going on? There's a whole bunch of stuff going on this year. The speech Trump's supposed to make, the release of the files. We've got the missing scientists. I can't tell you. I can't tell you honestly what we're going to know in August, because I think we're going to know so much by May. All right, that I can't even conceive what's going to happen by August. But sure, MUFON's always timely, and I'm sure all of those conversations will be occurring at our symposium.
You brought up an interesting point about Gen Z. There seems to be a growing interest in this particular subject, along with other spiritually based types of experience that Gen Z seems to be hungering for. That I would say between our generation, maybe one back, kind of dropped. Considering just looking at the statistics of people interested in it. Where do you see hope on Gen Z? Where do you see hope in reaching them to take an interesting view and appetite towards this? Because we're getting ready to turn the reins over in many, many ways.
Excuse me. Well, yeah, that was going to be my answer. Is I don't know how much longer people want to see an old fogey like me talking. It's time for some new blood, and there are a lot of younger podcasters out there now. Some of whom I watch, follow. Some I've actually been on their podcast. So I don't think that Gen Z, the desire to know about UFOs is diminishing. Maybe it's more, of a diaspora. There's so many different places they can be going to find out about UFOs. We really can't get a handle on what the interest is for that generation. But I would say that with the younger podcasters coming out now, that will retain and even grow a new generation of audience. If not MUFON, social media will take care of the void.
Does MUFON have a specific kind of vector that they're pushing towards Gen Z? I mean, your engagements in all the areas that Gen Z, functions and operates in with the rest of the public, but obviously they live in a completely different sphere than the rest of us do.
Absolutely, and we just named a director of membership, Anniversary Feinstein, and they're going to be looking at many different ways to attract not only the types of people in our age bracket, but also in the younger age brackets. We know we need to get a few programs up on YouTube that appeal to the younger generation, but I believe that our new director of membership is going to be getting a grip on that fairly quickly.
That's excellent. I'm glad you mentioned Peter, a mutual friend. In fact, I think I'm going to be with Peter in the not too distant future on his show, just chatting with him.
He's such a nice guy.
He is. And he's had a lot of work going on for the last year or so. So I'm looking forward to having a chat with him and seeing and checking in with him a bit. I bring that up because folks like him are a connection to a number of the folks that are no longer with us.
Right.
That and having one space removed from those kinds of folks is a rarity, and I can't tell you how many times, you pick up a book that and I find out something and I look and find out that I just missed, communicating, sending. Nowadays, it's so much easier with an email. Almost everybody has an email. I can almost find anybody's email or connect to it. I don't happen to do Facebook, but I mean, there's another. I'm the worst kind of person. I'll have somebody who does Facebook go find the information for me and then connect me up.
Uh,
Just terrible behavior, but I just don't. There's a limit to how much I want to try to control or be involved with. So I'm great to see that Peter's coming up. Now, talk a little bit about the movie and what Ron is bringing up and bringing to the table there. We kind of quickly went over that.
okay, Accidental Truth next is the follow-up to Ron James, our media relations director's first movie, Accidental Truth, which came out in 2023. Both movies are narrated by the actor Matthew Modine, who I actually got a chance to meet in the recording studio in Manhattan when he was narrating the film. It was fascinating to see how a film is narrated too. Matthew Modine, very, very nice guy. So the first Accidental Truth won over 20 awards, and it's been nominated. The new one's been nominated for 7 so far. It's going to be coming out probably June 2nd, and it expands on the different ideas that Ron put forth in Accidental Truth, the original movie. One of the interesting, I've seen the movie twice. I'm actually in it for like 5 minutes, so I'm very happy about that, talking about our Russian sample that turned out to be very anomalous. But Ron put a lot of work into this, and the section on whether or not we're in a simulation is probably one of the most fascinating things I've watched. The movie's broken up into like 5 parts, each part taking you a little further along what is really an intense journey. So I look forward to seeing that when it comes out June 2nd. Accidental Truth next by Ron James.
When you start to come together, you talk about, well, you're preparing to turn over the reins past the controls. That means you're in a transition kind of function operation now, doing that. So the movie, obviously, the updating technology wise of the database and the ability to. And I don't say it in a negative way, manipulate or synthesize, analyze the data, from multiple scopes. Talking about AI.
Right.
But what do you think is the most important thing for you? I'll give you what I think it is, but what's the most important thing that MUFON is trying to engage right now?
But what do you think it is?
Well, I think it's because getting the outreach. I don't want to be dismissive of other organizations. I have a very tough time trusting some of the other organizations that you said.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very neutral. I have no negatives on MUFON. I may have had feelings like, well, my God, it's just so slow. But that deliberate, slow process is the difference between having good information that you can analyze, that you can compare to something else and come to some kind of rational conclusion. So to me, selling MUFON to more people, and I don't mean that in the negative sense of selling it like a product, but selling people to the concept, this is worth your time.
Mm-hmm.
This is why it's worth paying attention to it, supporting it, because we are at the precipice of something. Now, personally, Bob, how I am on this. I don't need the government. In fact, the government is the last thing I want to come to confirm anything I feel or believe. Mm-hmm. I'm very anti on that particular part of it. But that said, we live in a time where this seems to be approaching an apex of some kind. Hopefully, I have doubts that it's ever going to be completely what we want, and every person has a slightly different degree of twist on what they want to be revealed. But I think we're a lot closer. And I think organizations like MUFON help prepare, help get people what we would say when I substitute school teachers. I'm not trying to teach you what to think. I'm trying to teach you how to think, to look at something, break it down, assemble it. And I think that's what MUFON does. So to me, it's that outreach and getting out to the whole population as much as possible, why this is an organization worth supporting in any way that you're going to support it.
Sure, and that's what I'm trying to do with the social media. Our social media outreach is ballooning. Not only do I do Facebook and X and Instagram, but I also write a lot of articles that go on our website, that go on our newsletters. Our newsletters go out to the general public. So our outreach to the public is substantial compared to other organizations. And we try to offer different things for different people, but we try to stick with the scientific method, nuts and bolts, okay? And we were talking about orbs before. At some point, where does orbs go from paranormal to scientific? All right, and we really don't know where that cutoff line is. It's the same thing with Bigfoot. MUFON won't investigate Bigfoot, a pure Bigfoot sighting, but a lot of sightings of Bigfoot are in conjunction with UFOs. So if there is a UFO involved, we will investigate a Bigfoot sighting. So there's lots of different technicalities. It's all in our handbook for field investigators, but I think that overall MUFON is probably the most grounded, definitely the largest and most sensible option for people to reach out to, especially if they're going to report a UFO. We investigate every case. And what we find is that about 90% of the cases on average are easily determined to be identifiable, but it's that 10% that keeps MUFON going.
Well, I've said in the past when we worked test flight operations, especially on something that was highly first of its kind, the X type of aircraft, we felt that you had mitigated risk enough when you got it down to 3%. When that the unknown, what you were testing, is down to 3%, and that's where all the interest is, right? And quite honest, as I told you, most times test flying, you want it to be very boring. You want it to be very, that's what you're basing, because you're trying to prove a hypothesis of how something is designed. Right. And then when you break into the unknown, you just hopefully, you're able to get back to the other side where you're back in that 97% we have control again. And then you can sit around and talk about how great your flying skills were or how interesting that was when you were terrified, for a couple seconds. In the words of Pappy Bollington, flying is very, very boring except for moments of extreme terror.
Yes, I was at one point in my career, I was a rail traffic controller, which is like a two-dimensional air traffic controller. Right. And basically it was rush hour when I really got my money's worth. I used to come in and put a quarter on top of the machine. It was like Star Trek. And you've got the work trains coming back from working in the tunnels overnight. They're coming back against traffic. I got the rush hour going. It was like the most stressful 90 minutes you can imagine. Within 6.5 hours of boredom.
Right.
Once rush hour was over.
So what I say to bring that up is, to me, that is the interesting part when you can define that band. Mm-hmm. Because for some folks, everything that they see is an extraterrestrial, is Absolutely. A UFO, and that's just not the way to approach it. And just as the person said, no, everything that you see has absolutely no possibility of being anything but man-made. Both positions are wrong in my estimate, because it just denies any kind of creative as well as logical dissection of what you're looking at. Mm-hmm. Why would you want not to know or be able to solve what that piece is out? So again, one of the things I like, this is the reason why I wanted to have you on, because I know we have the symposium coming. There's a lot of activity. I think you absolutely phrased it the best. What is it going to be like 30 days from when this show drops? Mm-hmm. What's it going to be 60 days? Mm-hmm. And then we're talking about 90, 95 days, the symposium. Mm-hmm. Maybe you'll have somebody very special on stage, shaking hands with Peter, because they've been allowed to come out of the shadows, or they're going to be part. Maybe they'll be passing out coins. I don't know. But to me, I hope more people will take a moment to think about this organization, think about people like you. Again, there's another part of it, another dimension to it that I think MUFON is probably doing a better job than most. And trying to be very respectful to everybody that's involved. Mm-hmm. But there tends to be sometimes, and there's nothing wrong with the tinfoil hat. I've got a baseball cap lined with it for a lot of stuff that goes on. But you've had some real world life experiences that brought you into this. You explained what got you started. You both had similar background experience at the beginning of this, except mine were the Soviets and paratroopers were going to be coming in. It was the Russians are coming, not the funny movie version that for a few hours that night in the darkness, all around candles. You obviously had much more interesting with your uncle. It sounds like he was a great guy to have in your court if you were stoking any kinds of ideas like that.
Absolutely, I loved my uncle. He was so cool.
Well, I can't imagine how it couldn't.
Yeah, yeah.
But here we are, and to me, I've only got to know Ron just a little bit, but these are real, everyday people who are drawn to a subject and drawn to it in a very organized way to look at it. And it's not boring, it's not dull, but it's not BS either. There's a process that you guys stick to. There's a code that you stick to on it, and you're trying to make it better, improve that latch time between events, investigation, report, and how it goes into the files.
Mm-hmm.
So, parting words to the audience besides see you in Cincinnati and jump on the cruise and come to Kentucky to the symposium.
Okay, I'll just mention that I do think that the phenomenon is real. It's probably an umbrella phenomena, UFOs. I will never say it's aliens, time travelers, interdimensionals, demons, or whatever, but I will go with my statistics that suggest to me that a lot of the UFO phenomenon is on the darker side. Okay, and I want people to know that. I would never do a meditation to reach out to try to make contact in my bedroom, for example.
Right.
That might not go the way you want it to, so use caution. Other than that, if you have a UFO report, if you've seen something's happened to you, go to MUFON.com and you can click on our red report button for a UFO, or if you feel you've been abducted, we have another button for that, and we will get back to you. And our experience or resource team will not only investigate with you, but they will offer resources to people who may have had difficulty with an experience. So MUFON is at the forefront scientifically and psychologically, and I think we're going to be around for a long time when you see what's coming out this year from us. Totally scientifically driven technology will be MUFON's future from here on out.
So one last thing that I want to touch upon. You mentioned Representative Luna.
Mm-hmm.
I think she's got some real good credibility.
Mm-hmm.
She just doesn't impress me as somebody who's interested in the votes here. In fact, if you're involved in this subject, no matter how forefront and provocative that it is, I still think you run a risk with a lot of constituents wondering what you're doing. The ever constant part of it. So who else in that set of folks around do you have a favorable reaction to? I'm curious if you would mind sharing that a little bit. If it's putting you on the spot, that's fine. But I said I think she's very reasonable. I think what she's asking for is reasonable, and she doesn't seem to be playing for the cameras to me. That's my take.
No, and what she asked for was very specific. She itemized each of those videos that she wants, and one of those videos is from the Lake Huron shoot down. 3 days, was it, after the Chinese balloon shoot down in February 2023? They shot down something up near Barrow, Alaska, something out in the Yukon in Canada, and something over Lake Huron. And that fighter pilot said it was octagon shaped. And that's the last you ever heard of that story. And I've been on 20 podcasts where I go, what happened to the Lake Huron object?
I believe, Bob, they fired 2 missiles.
Yeah.
In one of the reports that I read. Difficulty for the first one to lock on, so that tells you that it's a very low heat source, which gives a lot of credibility that it's another one of the hobbyist balloons and all these other things going. Okay, the shape is very, very strange, and the HUD film, the recording that you took off the heads-up display, would be interesting. And to me, one or two things comes into mind when you talk about a case like that. If you're not sharing with me, because I can't see how this is a national defense issue that you can't give me a better explanation.
Mhm.
unless something really, really serious is going on. This is pretty far within the U.S. Canadian border area. This is not like it's right on the coast. So that would be pretty serious. There's not a lot of easy access to that. So it's either something very, very chilling from a national security standpoint that you don't want to, once again, we don't want to alarm the public. That's always one of the things that we've been told for years. Or it's something much more serious in the area of what we think of when we talk about UFOs. But here's what scares me when we get to this. I get the feeling a lot of times that once interest is shown like that, someone like you makes a remark like that, I look at it and go, what are we not talking about here? It instantly gives cover to something else. It becomes the deception point. Look at this shiny thing over here.
Right.
And then if you ever do get the information and why your pocket's getting picked. And as a taxpayer, we all know what I'm talking about, that your pocket is getting picked.
That's why I'm saying be cautiously optimistic about disclosure, but don't let it break your heart
if it's something less
than
what you want. Well, I think what everyone has to determine is, as an individual, what this disclosure means to you. Mm-hmm. As I said, I don't need affirmation from what
I don't either. Yeah.
I know or I believe. I think, we've talked about this, but I think that when you realize that there has been subterfuge, there has been misdirection from the start, we live in a fairly, vindictive, that we're not going to buy the story, well, we thought we were doing the best for you at the time.
Right.
Well, fine. You thought you were doing the best at the time. We've kind of come clean on what we did in the 50s with the atomic tests. Mm-hmm. We've come forward and said, yeah, that wasn't the smartest thing in the world we did when we lined soldiers up in trenches and made them run towards the explosion to prove that we could put infantry into an area where this has gone off. Or, we have a higher rate of cancer because where we experimented and did this work in the Southwest of the United States put fallout over large swaths of the population, even though it was minimally populated. We've come up and had to answer up on that. And I much rather the truth. Martin Luther King, the truth will set you free, as he took it from the New Testament. I think we're really in a much better place if we get honest. But I wonder, are we so deep in the fibs that we're afraid to make that?
I personally think
thoughts on that.
I think we're pretty deep into the fibs. Listen, I've always been suspicious that there seems to be a certain cadre of people who always seem to get access to the press, to Congress, to the SCIF, all right? The certain whistleblowers, these certain news organizations and news people, these stars that have emerged, like Lou Elizondo and Christopher Mellon. It's like, why is it always a certain set of people? To me, it's always like MUFON's getting pushed away because the narrative wants to go not MUFON's way, but a certain way that the government or the media want. That's why I just say be careful what you're getting from the gatekeepers.
Again, I think that circles back to one of the big reasons I wanted to have you on and talk, because I think you touched upon the really proper closing for the show. Sometimes the science is dull. Sometimes the science is a little bit rigorous, that you have to put the facts and figures down, that you have to record. And I did accident investigation as an aviation safety officer. You just couldn't come in with a conclusion looking at, even if it looked completely obvious to you, you still weren't supposed to throw that in. You had to logically document what you had. You had to go. You had to make measurements. You had to go through it. I've seen some of the stuff that MUFON puts out, and it's very similar to how we look at an aviation accident, mishap, tragedy. It's the same way. You want to figure out what's the motivation. This is where I think MUFON and aviation safety are very, very close. You want to be able to prevent something bad from happening again. Now, I'm saying MUFON calls these bad events. You're trying to collate information so that you can figure out what happened and what does it mean.
Sure, I can tell you, like right off the bat, that going north to south on the Atlantic coast, the number of planes that are coming in close contact with cubes and
cylinders,
orbs,
Yeah.
But it's mostly like it's fast moving orbs, sometimes with a cube in it, sometimes
Right.
just a cube. But we're getting videos. There is a corridor, a UFO corridor off the coast of the eastern United States for sure.
Interesting.
And that's the type of statistical work that MUFON does.
Right. But see, that doesn't really, if you used to have a rock band, Bob, see, you drove trains and you had to keep the trains on time.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's really important to the people that are on the trains, but you weren't banging on an electric guitar. So I don't know. Maybe MUFON needs to put a rock group together to help, bring that other part of the story in. I'm, be,
I,
I'm, being, I'm being naughty. I apologize.
I understand what you're saying though before about investigating. What I used to investigate train accidents,
Right.
and if somebody derailed, you had to look at what was the slope the track was on, how fast did the speedometer say they were going, what was the speed limit. Sometimes you had to take measurements if it was due on a track, how far could the train have slid on its own without the engineer being in control. So I get and that's pretty much how MUFON uses the scientific method. Also, we just don't say, oh yeah, it's a flying saucer, because we don't know what it is in most cases. In most cases, we do actually. It's the 10% that we don't.
Right.
It's
And,
like
it, and you can't point to 10% if you aren't correctly identifying that 90. Giving a reasonable explanation of what's going on. There's an interesting point you make in that, and then I'm going to tell you something that I think will crack you up. The measurement, when you can take measurements, like you said, helps you with what's reported. Now, I've been with pilots that were sure that they did not hit the switch that caused something to leave a plane early or caused something to go wrong. And there, one or two things, it was either divine intervention that caused it at that point, if that was accurate that they did not touch it, or they did something and they didn't realize when they did it. And you can look at that whole makeup of activity there. And then you figure, well, how do we prevent that? Well, we're going to put a cover on that. We should have thought of that before, but luckily, we didn't lose anybody on this and we didn't badly damage an airplane. Let's get that solved. And then, God forbid, when you have the terrible mishaps, when you have loss of life. So many years back, young guy stationed in Europe. I was in the Air Force in those days, and I was in my master's program, and I had a retired Air Force colonel that was in the class, and we got into this aviation safety aspect of it. And he talked about a crash, and he said, I had all these different people from the German countryside that came up to explain what they saw. And he said the most accurate, the most detailed, the most, not so much colorful, but just well-spoken was the man that came in and said the reason the F-4 crashed is that a UFO came up behind it and knocked it down into the ground. Now, obviously, they were dismissing it right out of pocket. But what he said was, because we were going to follow those standards, that was put in the mishap report. This person's observations, they couldn't find anything that matched what he said occurred, but they didn't dismiss it. Now that plugged into my brain to go, these are some pretty hardened guys. They had survived being in Vietnam. We're facing down the Soviet bear on the other side of the Iron Curtain, and they still went through the rigorous requirements of putting down and documenting everything there, not putting a value judgment against. This is what was said, and we couldn't find anything to match it. I was always impressed by that.
Right. I'll tell you that some of the most impressive reports that we have in our database come from former military, especially sailors in the South China Sea and the Sea of Japan during the Vietnam War. We have some fascinating reports of things, USOs, the size of football stadiums coming out of the South China Sea in front of an aircraft carrier, and the whole crew sees it, and they're told, don't talk about it. So sure, and we have tons of jets chasing UFOs, and we have airplanes being chased by UFOs. All right, that change shape. One of them that I was thinking of specifically was a blue orb following a plane that turned into an octagon, which brings me back to Lake Huron.
Right.
Lake Huron, in the MUFON database, 2 years before that Lake Huron shoot down, there was another octagon report from that same island near a Coast Guard station on near the northern Michigan Peninsula.
Right, the Upper Peninsula.
And how you can't find something that went down in 150 feet of water. That Lake Huron's only 150 feet of water at that spot, right? But yet, that same year, you could find the Titan submersible that imploded on its way to the Titanic, and that was found.
A slight difference in depth, right?
12,000 feet of water in a search field the size of Connecticut. They find it in 4 days, but you can't find something in 150 feet of water. That's why I want to see that photograph or video specifically from Ana Luna.
Sure. Well, I think it's, I love the approach. We will hope and support MUFON, especially the symposium. Maybe we can get together after the symposium. Well, I'm sure we'll have something to chat about come the end of August, one way or the other, beginning of September. I really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you.
I'm starting back up doing my solo interview, so hopefully it wasn't too bad for you, and you look forward to doing another one. And keep in touch, and we will probably be chatting with you again on UAP Crossfire. We enjoyed our time together, the Cowboys, so to speak, and MUFON. It was a fun roundup of lots of things that we talked about and ideas.
I appreciate you guys. You, Chris, Don, the Padre. Thank you very much. UAP Crossfire.
And MUFON. MUFON. Let's make sure we support. And if you can't make it there, get on the website, take a look at what some of the things there, and be motivated to maybe give a little support to them. It's
MUFONsymposium.com.
Absolutely wishing the very best and success on that. And I think it's going to be a very successful get together. So as I always try to conclude my shows, God's peace that surpasses all knowledge and understanding. On Eagle's Wings, Commander Cobra, my special guest tonight, Bob Sparing. A big thank you to Amanda, the producer, who once again jumped through the hoops, and also by holding the hoops for me to get the show together tonight. Appreciate your efforts as always, Amanda. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Commander. Thank you.